Hi, I'm Tierney. A week ago, I watched my sister stand on stage microphone and hand her voice sharp enough to cut through the heavy silence of the hall. She didn't hesitate. She didn't falter. She pointed straight at me, her words scorching the air. "You ruined our family." And then my parents clapped. Not a hesitant clap, not even confused applause. It was deliberate, like punctuation at the end of a sentence meant to erase me. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply stood, let the weight of her words settle into my bones, and walked out quietly. This morning, I woke up to 19 missed calls. 19. But none of them carried the words I longed for. I'm sorry. None asked if I was okay. They only rang because they needed something from me. Because somehow, even silence isn't enough for them until it's their silence I'm filling. They've erased me piece by piece. My name vanished from the family photo like I had never been there. The project I built, every late night, every sacrifice, was paraded as their achievement. Scholarships were handed out under my initials, but my name was never spoken aloud. It's as if I've become both indispensable and invisible at the same time. And I keep asking myself, why do the people who silence you always call back when they need your voice? And what do you do when the people who once called themselves your family become nothing more than spectators to your disappearance? That night, the hall smelled of lemon oil and hymnals, that faint perfume of old churches where history clings to the walls. Folding chairs lined the back, uncomfortable and creaking when someone shifted their weight. At the front, cream and gold balloons drooped in tired arcs decorations that pretended at celebration, but sagged with truth. It wasn't a wedding, wasn't a gala. Just another fundraiser dressed in borrowed clothes. A slideshow played on the projector. Frame after frame of the Isolde initiative filled the screen. Every time her face appeared, the audience clapped like trained echoes. I didn't. I couldn't. I sat at the edge aisle, legs crossed, nursing a paper cup of coffee gone lukewarm. I had chosen navy instead of black so I wouldn't look like I was attending a funeral. But it didn't matter, because in every way that counted, I was. Nobody noticed me. Nobody mentioned me. My name wasn't printed in the glossy pamphlets. My presence wasn't acknowledged. I was a ghost occupying a chair. Verena avoided my eyes completely, though once I caught the brief, sharp glance she gave me as if she was only checking whether I'd embarrass her. Gareth nodded when I walked in earlier, but the gesture was empty, a formality without warmth. And Isolde, well. Isolde floated from group to group like air belonged to her alone. I don't even know what triggered it. Maybe it was the way I yawned. Maybe it was my silence when someone called her the heart of Charleston. Maybe it had nothing to do with me at all and everything to do with how guilt claws at someone who's been fed too much praise without ever tasting resistance. She was halfway through thanking her sponsors when she stopped mid-sentence. You know what she said? Her voice steady but sharp. I wasn't going to say this, but I'm tired of pretending. The room shifted, a ripple of silence passing through rows of chairs. She scanned the audience and then her gaze locked on me. You ruined our family, Tierney. Every good thing fell apart when you left. The microphone didn't even need to echo. Her words carried all on their own wildfire through dry grass. Someone gasped. And then Verena clapped. Two slow, deliberate claps. I remember the sound more vividly than the sight. Gareth didn't join her, but he didn't stop her either. Around me, half the crowd looked uneasy, while the other half simply stared, waiting for the next act of the spectacle. Not one person said, "That's not true." Not one voice defended me. And I stayed silent. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a scene. I simply stood, set my cup down carefully on the table's edge, and walked toward the side door. My heels struck the hallway floor like a judge's gavel final and echoing. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. The night air outside cut into me sharp and cold, carrying her words into my skin as though they had followed me out the door. But I kept walking. Because if I didn't, I knew I'd never stop standing in rooms like that. Rooms where my absence mattered more than my presence. Charleston evenings usually cling to your skin humid and heavy, as if the air itself refuses to let go. But that night felt different. It wasn't sticky. It wasn't suffocating. It was cold, an unnatural kind of cold that seeps in when your name has been burned out of a room. I walked out of the hall heels, striking against the pavement, and slid into my car without looking back. The downtown windows glowed like rows of watchful eyes storefronts humming with the kind of life that didn't notice me. I didn't bother turning on the radio. Just silence. Thick, suffocating silence. The kind that wraps itself around you, pressing in, reminding you that no one had followed, no one had called after me. Not then. Not ever. I drove until the city lights thinned out, crossing the bridge where the water shimmered dark and restless beneath. Just past it, I pulled into a cheap roadside motel. One of those places that looked tired, even at a glance, stained blinds sagging like wilted curtains, a soda machine humming in the corner, stocked with nothing but dust. The man at the front desk didn't ask questions. He barely looked up. Just slid the room key across the counter after glancing at my ID. As though people like me showed up often quiet, worn, carrying a silence heavier than their luggage. The room smelled faintly of bleach, trying to cover something older, something it couldn't quite erase. I flicked on the bedside lamp and watched the bulb flicker before settling into a weak yellow glow, casting shadows that clung to the corners of the room. I sat on the edge of the bed. Didn't unpack. Didn't move. Just stared at the wall as if answers might crawl out of the peeling wallpaper. Eventually, I reached for my phone. It lay face down on the nightstand screen, cold to the touch. The moment I picked it up, it buzzed. Once. Then again. And again. Relentless. When I flipped it over, the screen glared back at me. 19 missed calls. Verena, Gareth, Isolde. Their names lined up like soldiers, like a list of debts I never agreed to carry. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling not from weakness, but from the weight of choice. Answer or erase. Forgive or finally block them out forever. I didn't sleep much that night. Motel beds have a way of reminding you that comfort isn't free, not just in price, but in peace. The mattress sagged in the middle, the blanket itched, and every sound from the hallway felt like it was meant for me. By the time my eyes closed, dawn was already creeping through the blinds. When I finally opened them again, it was 8:07 a.m. The room was gray with morning light. My phone still sat face down on the nightstand, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat I hadn't asked for. I didn't need to check. I already knew. More missed calls. Always in the same order. Verena, first, Gareth, second. Isolde last, like they were choreographed, even in their attempts to reach me. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I just stared at the screen until it dimmed again. Then, almost without thinking, I unlocked it. Not to respond, never to respond. To escape. My thumb slid to photos. The album labeled Home. One I hadn't opened in months. I scrolled past Christmases and birthdays, vacations, where everyone wore matching sweaters and smiled like we believed the world was whole. For a moment, those pictures felt like lies pressed between glass-trapped smiles from people I no longer recognized. But then I stopped. On one photo. Just one. It wasn't from years ago. It was recent 2 weeks back when I had broken my own rule and gone to the house on Sycamore Lane. After more than a year away, I told myself I was only there to collect a few things. To prove I wasn't running. Verena had brewed tea I didn't drink, setting the delicate porcelain cup in front of me like a peace offering she never intended to keep. Gareth sat in his usual chair, newspaper folded, but unread the way he always pretended to be busy. Isolde wasn't there, not physically, but her laughter bled faintly through a speakerphone resting on the kitchen counter, as though even her absence had to take up space. And then I remembered walking into the living room. How my eyes fell to the fireplace, to the frame that had sat there since I was 12. A gold one with a beaded edge Verena had chosen because it felt timeless. For years, it had held the family portrait we took when I was 16. I could still feel the itch of the cardigan Verena forced me into, the awkward smile I hid behind braces, the navy and cream outfits we wore because she insisted families should coordinate. That frame used to hold us. All of us. But when I looked closer, I realized it didn't anymore. Now the frame held something else. Not us. Not the version of us that once existed, but a new portrait. Bigger, brighter. Curated like a magazine cover. Isolde stood in the center. Her hair styled in a perfect wave, her hands folded gently in front of her like it was a campaign photo. Verena angled toward her, beaming in a champagne-colored blazer that caught the light as though she had planned it that way. Gareth was beside them, posture straighter than I had seen in years, his chest lifted, as if finally proud of something, though it wasn't me. Even Sprout the family dog sat at their feet, freshly brushed eyes wide and obedient, as if even he had been told to play his part. I wasn't in it. Not behind the camera, not blurred in the background. I was gone. Same frame, same wall, different truth. I remembered standing there, frozen for a full minute, staring until my eyes stung. My body didn't move, not even to blink. And then I heard footsteps, Verena's. She appeared behind me, her voice polished as ever Isolde had it printed for the fundraiser. Isn't it beautiful, beautiful? That was the word she used for my absence. I hadn't said a thing. Just nodded, walked upstairs, and 20 minutes later left the house without the things I had come for. Back in the motel, I found myself staring at that same photo on my phone screen. I had snapped it that day, almost without thinking. At the time, I didn't know why. Maybe I just needed proof that it wasn't a dream, that they really had replaced me. Now, looking at it in the dim yellow light of the motel lamp, I understood. It was my evidence. My reminder. I opened my email. Fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed a subject line, "Your new version of us." Then I stared. My pulse in my ears, my throat dry. And I deleted it. Subject gone. Draft gone. Words swallowed back down. I couldn't send it. Not yet. The phone lit up on its own. A voicemail began to play, one of those where the sound cuts in just as the speaker inhales. "I hope you're not overreacting," Verena's voice said, steady, polished, measured. "Family things get messy. We didn't mean to upset you." She always spoke like a PR statement. Controlled. Practiced. A tone made of glass, transparent, breakable, but sharp enough to cut. We didn't mean. We didn't know. We didn't realize. But they always did. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a small cream envelope. The kind I used to keep stocked in my desk drawer back when I still believed handwritten words mattered. On the front, my own handwriting. Her name, my mother's. Dated exactly 1 year ago. I had written it on a night when loneliness outweighed the pain, when I missed her enough to forget all the ways she had hurt me. Inside was a letter folded twice. I unfolded it and read it aloud into the emptiness. "Mom, if there's still space in your heart for me, I'd like to sit there again. I'm not asking for everything, just for a call back. I miss our Tuesday talks. I miss you." My voice cracked on the last word. I folded the paper back, slid it into the envelope, still sealed, still unopened, just like me. By morning, the motel room felt airless. My body restless. I pushed through the door into the street. The cafe across the way had just opened, its neon sign buzzing, faintly half-lit. The bell above the door gave a half-hearted jingle when I walked in, like even it was too tired to greet me. The barista didn't look up, thumbs scrolling on his phone face, lit by a glow that didn't belong to the real world. That was fine. I wasn't here for small talk. I just needed a booth and outlet and coffee strong enough to slice through the fog that had followed me for months. I found a booth in the far corner, the one with the chipped faux leather seat and the clearest view of the door. Not because I was expecting anyone. Old habits die hard. Sliding into the seat, I plugged in my laptop. The screen blinked to life, its glow spilling across my face like a reminder I still had work. I still had words. I still had something left, even if my family had already rewritten me out of their story. The familiar whir of the laptop fan sputtered to life, dragging itself into motion like a reluctant sigh. The sound filled the quiet corner of the cafe, a soft reminder that machines, like people, only start working when pushed. Then came the wait. The long pause for the cafe Wi-Fi to catch. Long enough for me to regret skipping breakfast, short enough that I didn't have time to talk myself out of what I was about to do. The screen flickered and then steadied, a pale glow washing across the scratched Formica table, lighting up my hands like they belonged to someone about to confess. And there it was, a folder I hadn't touched in months, maybe years. A relic from before everything fell apart. Before the silence. before the edits, before the slow erasure. Not the kind of erasure that comes with a fight loud and final, but the kind that happens in whispers through carefully chosen omissions, through accidental oversights, through history rewritten until you start to question if you were ever there at all. I double-clicked. The folder opened, spilling out drafts of grant applications, program outlines, logo mock-ups from when Canva felt like a luxury instead of a lifeline. Meeting notes from cramped Sunday sessions in my old apartment, the kind of meetings where the printer jammed every third page, where burnt toast clung to the air, where laughter and frustration mixed like roommates forced to share too much space. And I could almost hear it again. Isolde humming under her breath when she was thinking that absent-minded tune she always swore she didn't notice. I remembered believing so fiercely in the mission that it kept me awake at night, my chest buzzing with possibility. Believing this was ours, equal shares of vision, of labor, of sacrifice. A nonprofit born from nothing carried on. Nothing but stubborn hope powered by conviction, not ego. By purpose, not ambition disguised as virtue. We dressed it in the language of empowerment because that's what it was supposed to be. I opened a new browser tab, my hands moving before my mind could stop them. I typed in the URL I hadn't dared to revisit, the isoldeinitiative.org. The page bloomed onto the screen with all the polish we used to dream about. A soft piano track played in the background. Slow pans across classrooms filled with diverse, beaming faces. Children's laughter synced with carefully timed cuts. And there it was, front and center, the tagline we had scribbled onto a napkin one night, now dressed in bold white letters against a fading sunrise. Founded by one woman's dream for equity. My stomach tightened as if the words themselves had grown hands and clenched around me. I scrolled further. Our mission statement. The one we stayed up rewriting at 2 a.m. over mugs of oversteeped tea and cold grilled cheese sandwiches. Our pillars of transformation. Our vision for generational impact. Every word was still there, word for word. But not my name. Not once. No Tierney Shipley under our story. No mention on the advisory board. No trace at all. As if I had never been there. As if I hadn't spent 3 years giving everything I had until there was nothing left of me but exhaustion and conviction. I opened the Wayback Machine, my heart thudding a rhythm somewhere between fear and fury. And there it was, proof layered in time. Archived versions of the site like sediment exposing the story they thought they could bury. At first co-founder, later valued early contributor, and eventually nothing. Not a name. Not even a ghost. I began to take screenshots, every page, every timestamp, every version where my fingerprints still clung before someone decided to scrub them away like an old stain. Each click was both an act of preservation and defiance, as though capturing them meant I could hold on to the truth just a little longer. By the time I looked up, the coffee beside me had gone cold. I lifted the cup anyway out of habit more than need and took a sip. The bitterness hit my tongue sharp and punishing, settling in my throat like a reminder. Not all things grow sweeter with time. Some things only curdle. I minimized the browser window, the glossy site disappearing into a small square at the bottom of my screen like it had never existed. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached into my bag past the tangle of charger cords, loose receipts, and the crinkled wrapper of a forgotten granola bar. My hand closed around something hard and familiar. A tiny flash drive, its casing cracked at one corner, the kind of relic you forget you're carrying until the moment you need it. I plugged it in. The drive blinked to life, loading like it too was waking from a long sleep. Inside was a chaotic graveyard of old documents, drafts of things I'd once believed mattered, half-finished budgets, scanned receipts, meeting minutes written in hurried shorthand. Most of it useless, but some carried the weight of entire histories. And then I found it. A single PDF tucked inside a folder I hadn't dared open in years, the scan of my grandmother's will. I clicked and the screen filled with her familiar scrawl, the loops and flourishes of her handwriting preserved in scanned ink. My chest tightened, warmth and sorrow rushing through me in equal measure. For a moment, I was back at her kitchen table, the smell of peppermint tea rising from her cup, the sound of her bracelets clinking as she underlined things with her favorite green pen. Clause 9. Underlined twice. All educational and community programs co-developed by Tierney Shipley are to remain her sole intellectual property, including materials, concepts, and derivative frameworks. I froze, staring at the words until they blurred. My name, my work, my inheritance, right there spelled out in her deliberate, undeniable handwriting. And then I remembered. Verena, self-appointed family archivist, had insisted after the funeral that she keep the originals safe. Just to organize things, she had said, patting my hand like I was still a child. Keep it clean. Naive. Grieving. I had handed them over without hesitation, grateful to let someone else hold the weight for a little while. And that was when it began the rewriting, not through confrontation or accusations, but through something quieter, sharper. Keystrokes. Silent edits. The kind of betrayal that erases you not with noise, but with absence. I exhaled long and deliberate, then set to work. First, I forwarded the scanned files to a brand new email account, one I'd created and never shared with anyone. Then I uploaded everything to a secure cloud drive, encrypted the folder twice, and went down the long list of every password I could still remember, changing each one until the process itself felt like shedding old skin. Finally, I backed up the drive again on another device just in case. Evidence. Proof. Receipts. Whatever word you wanted to give it, I had them now. And they were mine. I opened my inbox and started drafting a message to Isolde. The subject line came to me immediately. You built it on bones, and I kept the x-rays. I stared at the blinking cursor, my fingers hovering over the keys. Every part of me wanted to press send, to shove the truth in her face, to force her to look at the legacy she had stolen and buried under her name. My chest ached with the want of it, the justice of it. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I clicked save. Some truths don't need to scream to stay alive. They just need to be documented, preserved, ready, waiting for the right moment. Because next time I promised myself I would not be erased so quietly. The afternoon light spilled through the thin motel curtains in long, slanted stripes, painting the room in a faded gold. Dust floated in the still air, catching in the light like fragments of old ghosts. The hum of the air conditioner clicked and stuttered, the only sound besides my own steady breathing. I had no plans to leave the room. Not after the cafe. Not after the silence. Not after waking up to the truth pressing down on me like a weight across my ribs. I needed stillness, if only to remind myself I still existed in the present, not just in the archived versions of a stolen story. I pulled my tote bag off the chair and unzipped it slowly, as though it carried something fragile enough to break under haste. Buried between my wallet and a half-used legal pad was a slim gray folder. The marker ink on the cover had faded almost to nothing, but I still recognized the words scrawled there. Letters never sent. I hadn't opened it in over a year. I didn't need to. I already knew what lived inside. I slid out the top envelope, the one I had written to Verena last winter. Never mailed. My handwriting stared back at me, careful and round, as though neat penmanship could disguise the anger behind it. I remembered the night I wrote it, how the room was dark, except for the yellow glow of the desk lamp. How my hands shook as I pressed too hard on the pen, the ink bleeding into the paper. I remembered the sharp, clean burn of betrayal in my chest, and the way the words spilled out of me, too fast to control, too heavy to hold. The letter was still sealed, addressed in my hand, waiting for a delivery that never came. And tonight, in the heavy quiet of the motel room, I wondered, not for the first time, if maybe it wasn't too late to send it after all. I remembered that night too clearly, though I had tried to forget. I had walked up to her front door in the dark, heart pounding as if I were trespassing on my own blood. I slid the envelope through the mail slot, the paper making the faintest hiss against the metal, and left before the porch light flickered on. I didn't wait. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly. A week passed in silence. She never mentioned it. I told myself she hadn't seen it yet, clinging to that lie like a child to a blanket. But deep down, I knew she had. Inside was only a single sheet of paper folded neatly into thirds. My handwriting pressed too hard in places, the ink fading slightly where the pen had hesitated, where my hand had trembled. Mom, I had written. I don't know how to say this right. I'm not angry anymore. I miss us. If there's a way back, I'd like to find it. Reading it now, it felt like someone else had written it. Someone softer. Someone who still believed a letter could stitch up years of silence. Someone naive. I pressed the page flat on the bedspread, staring at the familiar loops of my script, then folded it back into its envelope as carefully as if it were glass. The seal was unbroken, just like the silence between us. I reached for my phone and began scrolling, drifting through a history of messages like sifting through ashes. I stopped on a screenshot Clarabelle had sent me not long ago. A thread from 6 months back. My message to Verena. I know I messed things up, but I still love you. Can we talk? The gray check mark said it had been sent. Above it, the red bar of finality blocked. So when Verena told people I didn't know Tierney tried to reach out, she lied. She knew. She chose to ignore it. They weren't waiting for reconciliation. They were waiting for compliance for my silence. For me to vanish neatly without protest. A sharp chime pulled me back. A voicemail notification. Her voice filled the motel room, smooth as glass, practiced as a politician's. I really wish you hadn't made this public. Family things are complicated, and you're making it worse by airing all this. I hope you realize that. Always the same tone, calm and cutting at once, as though my existence, my voice was the real offense. As though truth was dangerous only when I was the one speaking it. My jaw tightened. I tossed the phone onto the bedspread and stared up at the ceiling, the buzzing motel air conditioner humming like a cheap lullaby. I had stopped noticing it days ago. Later that evening, when the silence became unbearable, I busied myself by folding laundry back into my suitcase. My hands needed something to do, even if it was meaningless. Then Clarabelle called. Her voice was tight, urgent. I found something, she said. She didn't wait for me to ask before sending it through. The photo lit up my screen, a birthday card. Light pink watercolor flowers curled delicately across the corners. My handwriting inside. I didn't even need to zoom in, I remembered every word. I had spent 2 whole days choosing that card, another hour pressing a dried flower into the crease, another 45 minutes carefully writing the note. I had slipped a gift card into the fold, hoping she'd see it not just as money, but as a gesture, a bridge. She never mentioned it. Not once. Clarabelle whispered, as though afraid of being overheard. I found it behind the junk drawer, buried under a stack of expired coupons and an old grocery list from last summer. I don't think she ever opened it. The words hit harder than any voicemail. Not even anger this time, just a hollow, aching confirmation. A gesture meant to heal, dismissed so casually it may as well have never existed. My chest tightened as I imagined it, my card lying there, forgotten my words. Unread my attempt at love, reduced to clutter in a drawer. Of course she didn't. The words slipped out before I even realized I had spoken them. Bitterness coated my tongue like ash. I lowered myself into the chair at the small motel desk, its laminate surface scarred by years of careless elbows and coffee cup rings, and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen lit up the stale room, throwing shadows across the wrinkled curtains. The blank email draft blinked at me like an accusation. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling between fury and restraint. Then, without thinking, I started typing, "If you ever lie about me again, erase my name or claim what I've built, I won't stay quiet." The words bled onto the page, sharp and unfiltered. For a moment, I let myself imagine hitting send, watching the message cut through the polished mask she always wore. But I couldn't. I stared at the lines, deleted, half rewrote them, then sat back and just breathed. My chest rose and fell like I had been running. My anger had nowhere to go. It rattled inside me like a trapped bird. I didn't send it. Instead, I printed it out. The hum of the motel printer filled the silence. A single sheet of paper slid out warm in my hands, heavier than it should have been. I took a thumbtack from the tiny bulletin board hanging crooked on the wall and pinned it next to the printout of my grandmother's will. Not a letter to her. A warning to myself. A reminder. Maybe even the first step toward something else. The next morning, I walked into City Hall. From the moment I stepped inside, I could tell the entire event had been staged to impress, but not for people like me. The air was thick, a suffocating blend of floral perfume and the cloying sweetness of catered food trying too hard to pass for luxury. I kept my steps quiet, measured. Early enough to escape the spotlight, late enough not to look out of place. I wore no name tag, carried no title, only a folded ticket pressed into my palm by one of the few who still remembered. A colleague from long ago. Someone who knew the truth. Someone who hadn't forgotten what, or rather, who had built the foundation they were now so eager to celebrate. At the far end of the grand hall, a massive silk banner stretched across the wall like a lie embroidered in gold, honoring our pillars, the Shipley family. The words gleamed under soft uplighting, flanked by corporate logos and marble-patterned backdrops designed to mimic permanence and grandeur. Just beneath, in delicate script that belonged on a wedding invitation, two names curled across the fabric like a knife twisting into my ribs. Verena Shipley. Asilda Shipley. Visionaries. Founders. Sisters in purpose. My name wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. I hadn't expected it to be, but seeing it erased in front of everyone watching history rewritten in gold lettering still felt like a betrayal all over again. That wasn't why I came. I came to see if they'd dare to do it again to use my work. My ideas while slicing my name from the credits as though I had been a shadow. To pretend I had never been in that drafty basement with them, shoulders pressed together against the cold building dreams out of scraps of paper and half-empty coffee cups. To pretend I hadn't been there when doubt gnawed at us, when rent was late, when poverty made us wonder if any of this would ever matter. I wanted to see if they still had the gall. Spoiler, they did. The hall had been transformed into something resembling a wedding banquet. Round tables draped in white linen circled the room, each centerpiece a delicate spray of pale roses under soft amber lights that hung from the ceiling like halos. Every place setting had been arranged with military precision gold-edged menus folded neatly atop porcelain plates. Words like seared lamb loin and beet puree with minted crumb tried to whisper wealth into the air. I didn't touch a thing. My hunger was elsewhere, coiled deep in my chest, gnawing on something far stronger than food. I wasn't there to eat. The polished tables, the golden menus, the soft gleam of candlelight, none of it mattered to me. My stomach was tight-knotted with something stronger than hunger. As guests found their seats, the lights dimmed. A hush settled over the hall. Then the screen at the front flickered to life. A single piano note rang out, gentle, familiar. My chest tightened instantly. I knew that sound. I had written it. Years ago, in a tiny living room where the air smelled faintly of instant noodles and cheap coffee, where secondhand lights buzzed and cameras borrowed from a friend overheated after 10 minutes. That melody had been mine, a fragile little signature of hope tucked into the very first brand pitch we had ever dared to present together. I hadn't heard it in years, but the moment it played, I was back in that cramped room, surrounded by mismatched chairs and big, reckless dreams. I guess Isolde had saved it. The video began. Verena's voice, smooth and confident, filled the room. In the beginning, we had only an idea, and faith in one another. I almost laughed out loud. Faith in one another, is that what they called it, cutting me out, taking credit, erasing my name while I clawed my way out of burnout. Sleepless nights, panic attacks that left me breathless on the floor. Faith, no, theft. Footage unspooled across the screen like a glossy dream interviews, archival clips, brand slogans rolling in cinematic sweeps, perfectly lit product launches, photos from the early days. Only they weren't their early days alone. Some of those images were mine. Photos I had taken, slides I had built, storyboards written in my handwriting at 2 a.m. with a half-dead pen. Every piece carried my fingerprints. Every frame had my shadow lingering inside it, except my name was gone. Cropped, blurred, erased. It was like watching my own life stitched into a stranger's highlight reel. I was there and yet not there. A ghost haunting every scene. Behind me, a voice whispered low but clear enough. Didn't Turney used to run this? I didn't turn. Didn't flinch. I kept my eyes forward, nailed to the glowing screen, watching someone else mouth the words I had once whispered to myself in the dark to keep going. When the video ended, applause broke out in waves. Hands clapped, glasses clinked, cheers echoed against the marble walls. I clapped too. But not for them. My palms stung as I applauded the ghost of myself still alive in those stolen fragments. The me who had once believed we were building something real. Something honest. Something that belonged to all of us. Then came the banquet. A grand hall unfolded like a stage set for royalty. A mirrored bar gleaming at the far end. Seating charts glowing from backlit boards as though wedding guests were being escorted to their royal courts. Names printed in tiers, benefactors, partners, visionaries, emerging voices. I searched the list until I found my table. It was shoved to the back, tucked neatly beside a side door where staff slipped in and out carrying trays. A perfect place for someone you didn't want to be seen. At every other seat, a name card weighted thick paper embossed in gold ink, crisp and flawless. At mine, a folded napkin. My name scrawled in blue pen, misspelled, the kind of mistake a child might make on a spelling test. Turn. A staff member brushed past me, offering a quick, breathless apology. Someone added you last minute. I stared at the napkin as if it had personally insulted me. And maybe it had. It was more than paper, it was proof. Proof of how they saw me, an afterthought, a footnote. Something you jot down carelessly because it doesn't matter if it's spelled right. I didn't sit. I didn't touch the wine, the glistening glasses, the plates of lamb and beet puree. Instead, I rose. Quietly, calmly. My steps were measured, deliberate. I walked straight toward the stage. The MC had just stepped down, laughter and chatter buzzing in his wake. The podium stood empty, unattended. No one moved to stop me. Why would they? To them, I wasn't important enough to be a threat. Just a woman in a neutral dress, face unreadable, walking with no rush, no hesitation. I reached the podium, stood behind it. The microphone didn't squeal with feedback. No spotlight turned my way. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't adjust the mic. I simply stood there, waiting. 10 seconds, then 20. The silence spread like a slow tide. At first, there were only the small sounds, a fork against porcelain, the restless shift of a chair leg across polished floorboards. But then, one by one, the conversations thinned out, voices collapsing into uneasy quiet until the weight of hundreds of stares pressed against me. I lifted my chin steady. My eyes scanned the room, moving past curious faces, past the stiff smiles and startled frowns. Finally, they landed where I knew they would, on Verena. She was mid-sip, a ruby-red glass of wine caught halfway to her lips. Her hand froze in midair, the stem trembling just slightly, but she didn't set it down. 2 seats away, Isolde blinked in quick succession, as if the effort of forcing her eyes to remain calm was too much. Her lashes fluttered like they'd been glued together, sealing in the panic. I let my gaze rest on them. Not long. Just enough to remind them I was still here, still standing. Then I looked back to the audience and spoke, my voice even clear, cutting through the silence. If my name disappears again, I promise the truth won't. That was all. Nothing more. No embellishment. No stumble. No apology. I stepped down smoothly from the podium. My heels struck the floor with steady clicks, each one echoing louder than the last in the vast, silent room. I didn't wait for security. Didn't wait for someone to usher me out with polite whispers. I didn't look back to see if Verena or Isolde followed with their carefully rehearsed outrage. No one moved. No one dared. It was as if I had cracked the floor wide open beneath them, and the entire hall stood frozen in fear of falling through. When I reached the entrance, I slowed just for a moment at the reception desk. There it was, the master guest list, a thick binder lying open on the counter, as ordinary as a grocery ledger. I flipped to the final page, scanning down the columns of names gilded in print. Mine wasn't there. Not even in the margins. Not even misspelled. It was gone, erased with intention. I smiled, pulled out my phone. Click. I had proof now. Proof and words spoken aloud in front of their gilded crowd. This time, the erasure would not go unanswered. Not again. By Monday afternoon, Charleston wrapped itself around me like a damp cloth. The air was sticky, clinging to my skin, to my clothes, to my breath. I tied my hair back, slipped into a plain blouse, and walked into the education conference with no expectations. I had been scheduled for a session weeks ago, but over the weekend, the panel simply vanished from the online program. As if it had never existed. As if I had never existed. Still, I showed up. At registration, I gave my name. The woman behind the table smiled politely, too politely, the kind of smile that tried to smooth over something ugly. She flipped through a paper list with a little too much haste, her eyes never really focusing. "There must have been a miscommunication," she said. "We had some last-minute adjustments." "Of course you did." I thanked her anyway, then walked into the main hall. The place buzzed with energy panels unfolding in breakout rooms, educators sipping complimentary lemonade in plastic cups, laughter and chatter filling the space like confetti. I stood still for a moment watching it all. I didn't belong here anymore. But I had built part of this, not this event specifically, but the very framework being paraded around, rebranded, scrubbed clean of my fingerprints. Across the room, I caught sight of a familiar face, Adrian, one of my former mentees. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened, and she gave a hesitant wave. She looked around first, like she had to make sure it was safe to acknowledge me, then hurried over. "I wish they'd kept you on the panel." She whispered, her voice low, carrying a tremor of frustration. "You were the one who made the mentoring structure work in the first place." I smiled, shrugged it off. Invisible architect that had become my role. The one who built, who structured, who poured life into the foundation, only to disappear when the structure was complete. Later, during a Q&A, Adrian stood. Her voice was small at first, but determined. "Since she's here," she said, motioning toward me, "and since she helped build the original outreach model, could we ask her to share a few words?" A pause. The kind of pause that feels like it stretches into forever. The moderator shifted in his seat, visibly flustered. But then, almost reluctantly, he handed me the microphone. I hadn't prepared a speech. I didn't need one. I just wanted to thank the people who still showed up for students when no one else did. So I began 2 sentences, maybe 3. And then nothing. The microphone died in my hand. Not a crackle, not a warning, just silence. Dead silence. The moderator fidgeted, avoiding my eyes. Someone coughed. Adrian's jaw tightened. And I just stood there holding the lifeless mic, the words still burning in my throat, too alive to be killed by their cheap little tricks. A staff member rushed forward, fumbling with the mic stand, tapping the bass, whispering something about technical issues, as if the silence itself were just a glitch, not a decision. But I knew better. I looked toward the back of the room, and there she was, Isolde. Leaning against the doorframe like she owned it, arms folded neatly across her chest-chin, tilted ever so slightly, her eyes locked on mine. And that smirk, the faint curl at the corner of her mouth, wasn't for the crowd. It was for me. A private signal. A dare. I didn't argue. Didn't demand the microphone back or make a scene. Instead, I handed it carefully to the moderator, gave Adrian a small nod that said thank you for trying, and stepped aside. I didn't need a spotlight tonight. I had something better. I had proof. Inside my bag sat a small voice recorder and a flash drive packed with time-stamped documents, screenshots of edits, financial trails, even fragments of my grandmother's will, pieces of a puzzle that together painted the truth. I wasn't here to wage war under chandeliers and stage lights. I was here to listen, to observe, to gather. Quiet strength was often the sharpest weapon. Later that evening, back in the dim motel room that smelled faintly of bleach and rain-soaked carpet, I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen cut through the dark as I typed in the login for the old project portal. The admin dashboard, the one I had built, paid for, maintained, long before anyone else cared. My fingerprints were in its code, my time and savings stitched into its foundation. Login failed. I tried again, slower this time, typing each letter with deliberate precision, as if care alone might unlock the door they had closed. Still nothing. I switched browsers, cleared cookies, even requested a password reset. Denied. Minutes later, an email landed in my inbox. Your access to the platform has been removed by the administrator. I scrolled down and froze. The confirmation carried a name, Zold Shipley. I didn't throw the laptop. I didn't cry into the pillow. I just sat there, hands still, breath steady, staring at the screen. That particular kind of stillness only arrives when you realize someone has stolen from you not once, but twice. First in silence. Then again, leaving your name engraved on the bones of the work they gutted. But instead of collapsing under it, I pivoted. I gathered every file, every screenshot, every draft, and forwarded it to the intellectual property lawyer I'd quietly contacted weeks ago. Nothing dramatic, nothing aggressive. Not yet. Just documented, preserved, ready. Then, with a kind of calm that almost frightened me, I opened social media. I didn't drop names. I didn't rant or accuse. Instead, I typed, "When silence becomes a pattern, it's not technical. It's intentional." I hit post. The words hung there, quiet but sharp, and almost instantly the likes began to climb. Comments trickled in questions, nods of recognition. I didn't need to call her out. She knew. And based on how quickly that post was spreading, everyone else was beginning to know too. By Wednesday morning, my inbox pinged with a subject line that made my stomach tighten. The Power of Family Legacy. It was from a Charleston lifestyle magazine, the kind of glossy publication that loves tidy narratives and carefully polished redemption arcs. I didn't remember subscribing, but there it was, a digital front page feature on Isolda's latest community campaign. The headline beamed above a photo I recognized immediately because once I had stood in it. Except I wasn't there anymore. My side of the image had been cut away, surgically removed, as if I had never existed. The porch looked familiar. The matching soft blue dresses, familiar. Verena had insisted we all wear them. But the version staring back at me had been retouched, smoothed, warmed, staged. The caption read, "Founding Family, Then and Now." I closed the tab, then reopened it. Not because I doubted what I'd seen, but because something in me wanted to confront the erasure directly, to face it head on. It wasn't grief anymore. It wasn't rage. It was something quieter, sharper. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally understand they're not just hiding you, they're rewriting you out of history. On the motel desk, my phone buzzed. Lennox. She didn't bother with greetings. Her voice came through steady, almost urgent. "Check your texts. I sent you something. You're going to want to sit down." My hands tightened around the phone as I opened the message. A screenshot stared back at me. Lennox hadn't added a single word of commentary. She just forwarded me the email. The moment I opened it, my stomach sank. The message had been sent from my name, my old email address, to the organizers of next month's State Education Summit. It was short, polite, and devastating. "Thank you for the invitation, but I'm no longer interested in participating in events that fail to reflect today's priorities. Please remove me from your lineup." The timestamp hit me like a slap. 2 days ago, exactly 27 minutes after I had posted my quiet statement online. When silence becomes routine, it is no longer a glitch, it's deliberate. But I had never written those words, never pressed send. I sat, frozen fingers grazing the edge of my laptop, my mind circling one thought: how many layers of lies does it take to build a house sturdy enough to stand lies stacked like bricks, each one cemented with denial and erasure? "They're scared," Lennox said over the phone, her voice calm but edged with steel. "And they're messy. You got under their skin." I didn't answer. Not right away. I just stared at the forged email, a proof of fear disguised as formality. Then I pulled the laptop closer and began to type. No hashtags, no melodrama. Just a clean sequence of facts, a timeline, documents, metadata, screenshots. My original curriculum drafts. Archived nonprofit pages from the Wayback Machine. And my grandmother's will. Piece after piece arranged like puzzle edges, clicking into place, undeniable, unedited. I sent it all to Maris. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but once she had been my intern back when I still taught public communications. Maris had grit, yes, but more importantly, she had a nose for rot, even when it gleamed under perfect lighting. Then I posted 2 photos. Not one. 2. The unedited family picture beside the cropped version from the article. My caption was simple. Funny what gets cut when the truth makes people uncomfortable. No names, no accusations. Within an hour, the post had over 400 shares. Comments flared like wildfire. "She's right there in the picture. I've seen the original. Why would they cut her out?" This feels deliberate. And then, like a stone dropped into still water, one message rippled through the thread. She was the one who did the groundwork. I know. I was in the room. Anonymous. I didn't reply. Didn't like or react. Instead, I printed each comment and pinned them to the motel wall. Not out of vanity, but because I'd spent years letting others write the story for me. Not anymore. Not this time. That night, the Charleston Historical Society glowed as if it were hosting a gala, not a community fundraiser. The front steps were lined with glass jars holding flickering candles, their light dancing against the worn stone. Just inside, a small brass plaque listed tonight's donors, arranged neatly by category. My name was there, buried under private contributor. No amount listed, no spotlight. Just small font, colder ink. I squared my shoulders and walked in. In one hand, an envelope. In the other, a flash drive. Not flowers, not empty gestures, facts. Hard, unshakable facts. No one expected me to show up. Which made each step steadier. The room buzzed with polished laughter, with tailored suits and satin dresses with silver trays carrying bite-sized appetizers. I didn't pause. I didn't need to. I hadn't come to mingle. I had come to put the truth on the table. I slipped into an empty chair in the third row, the kind of seat no one really notices, and folded my hands in my lap. The room hummed with chatter-polished shoes tapping against the hardwood glasses, clinking softly as servers passed with trays of champagne. I kept still waiting. Eventually, the stage lights dimmed just enough to draw attention, and a cheerful host in a pastel blazer stepped onto the platform, smile-rehearsed microphone in hand. He tapped it twice, and the room fell into a hushed anticipation. Thank you all for joining us this evening to honor the families whose generosity has made tonight's scholarships possible. Applause stirred politely across the hall. It is with great pride, the host continued, voice swelling, that we recognize the Shipley family whose extraordinary gift will fund 8 full scholarships for deserving local students. The room erupted claps echoing against the high ceiling. I didn't move. My palms pressed tighter together in my lap, the silence around me growing louder with every cheer. And then she rose. Isolde. Hair curled in flawless spirals, smile painted on like a mask she had been perfecting her entire life. She floated toward the stage with practiced grace, took the plaque, as if she'd earned it, as if the applause belonged to her. Her laughter sparkled in the microphone's feedback. But the truth burned in my chest. That donation, the very money being celebrated, the one funding those scholarships had come from my account. I had made it anonymously because I believed the students deserved it, even if the faces presenting it to them were the wrong ones. Even if credit was something I could let go of. But then on the side table near the stage, I caught sight of the certificate up close. And my heart stopped. The name listed under primary donor had been altered just enough to erase me to fold the contribution neatly into the legacy of the Shipley family. My initials, the small but undeniable proof that it had been mine alone, were gone. I sat there as the applause faded, the host wrapping up his speech with another warm thank you. The room shifted into cocktail chatter, the music swelling just enough to loosen conversation. Glasses clinked again. Laughter bloomed. That was when I stood. He'd like to offer a clarification, I said, my voice carrying sharper than expected. The room stilled almost instantly. The host blinked at me, thrown off script, but trying to remain obliging. Of course, he murmured, stepping back. I walked forward with calm, deliberate steps. No rush, no tremor, just certainty. At the podium, I slid the flash drive into the projector port. One click, then another. The screen behind me flickered alive. First image, the original donation receipt. Time-stamped, signed, directly tied to my bank transfer. Gasps rustled across the audience like a sudden breeze. Second image, the altered certificate they had displayed tonight, missing details, missing truth, and most importantly, missing my name. A murmur spread low and unsettled. I let it simmer. Then I spoke, voice steady, carrying I made that donation. Alone. No committee, no family partnership, no Shipley legacy attached. Just me. Another click. This time a video. My original submission form. The note I had attached to the scholarship for those who were forgotten but still gave. The clip was short, barely a minute, but when it ended, silence stretched long. By the wall, Verena stood, stiff lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. On stage, Isolde remained frozen plaque still in her hands, her smile extinguished. She didn't sit. She couldn't. No one clapped. No one dared. I didn't need it anyway. I thanked the host softly for the microphone, stepped down, and walked back the way I came. No grand exit, no shattered glass trailing behind me, just the solid, steady sound of my heels against the hardwood. Outside, the air had cooled, carrying the faint scent of damp stone and night-blooming jasmine. I inhaled deeply and let it out slowly, as if the wind itself could lift the weight I had carried for years. "You don't get to frame me anymore," I whispered, not to them, not to anyone else, but to myself. I decide where my story goes next. I stepped down the stone steps into the night. I didn't turn back. Sunday morning arrived softly without urgency. Light filtered through the blinds of my new apartment, a modest studio above a florist's shop, where the scent of fresh lilies and damp soil curled up the stairwell. Hardwood floors creaked under my bare feet. The stove was older than I was, but it worked. It was quiet. A kind of quiet I hadn't known in years. No footsteps pacing above me. No forced laughter echoing from the next room. Just silence, clean and unbroken. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine. No footsteps in the hall. No muffled arguments bleeding through thin walls. Just me, the whistle of a kettle rising slowly toward its peak, and the quiet certainty that this silence belonged to me now. I poured the tea into a chipped mug, steam curling like a ribbon toward the ceiling, and carried it to the small table by the window. The wood was scratched and uneven, but it was mine. I opened the laptop, the glow spilling across my face, unread emails stacked like dominoes. Most were the usual junk promotions names I didn't know, but tucked between them were a handful of messages from strangers, words typed in shaky sincerity. "Thank you for standing up. I wish I had done the same." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. But I read every single one slowly, carefully, as though holding something fragile in my hands. Not because I needed validation, but because I knew the weight of hitting send when your hands are trembling. The voicemail light blinked red. I pressed play. Verina's voice spilled out sharp even when she tried to polish it soft. "I hope this made you feel better." It didn't fix anything. Click. That was it. No apology, no admission. Just a warning disguised as concern. For the first time, it didn't sting. Her words no longer wrapped around my throat like a leash. Silence had been her weapon, but I had learned how to wield it, too sharp, deliberate, final. Scrolling back, I saw the trail of missed calls from the night of the ceremony, 19 in total. 19 times my phone rang, not one followed by an honest conversation. The voicemails were commands dressed as grievances. You didn't have to do that in front of everyone. You burned the family. Each one a desperate attempt to reassert control. Only one message stayed with me, Isolde's. Her voice cracked halfway through. "You knew what this would do to us. Why couldn't you have just let it be? I saved it. Not because I wanted to relive it, but because some truths deserve to be kept intact, preserved like pressed flowers between pages. Not played, not shared, just held in silence." By afternoon, I opened the window. The air outside carried the laughter of children scribbling with chalk on the sidewalk, arguing over who could spell dinosaur fastest. Their giggles tumbled upward, careless and unguarded. I leaned on the windowsill, letting the moment rinse me clean. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for a cinematic ending. No grand apology, no final confrontation wrapped in applause. The world hadn't suddenly become just or fair or whole, but it was quiet, it was honest, and it was mine. From the desk drawer, I pulled out a padded envelope that had arrived earlier in the week. Inside was a certificate-heavy cardstock edged in gold, bold letters across the top. The Shipley Scholarship Fund. Real now. Tangible. No longer an idea whispered in the margins or a credit stolen in the shadows. It was mine. Taped to the bottom was a handwritten note ink, slightly smudged. "Thank you for making space for someone like me. I won't waste it." I held it for a long time, standing in the patch of sunlight falling across the floor. I didn't rush to frame it or hang it where visitors could see. It wasn't for display. It was proof. Proof that some legacies aren't inherited polished or handed down like heirlooms. Some are carved out in the quiet by people no one expected to last. And yet we do. Not because we were given room, but because we claimed it. And once we did, we didn't ask twice. I looked around my tiny apartment, the paint peeling near the window, the fridge humming with effort, the tea cooling in my cup. And still, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was on the outside waiting to be let back in. I wasn't standing at the threshold of someone else's house begging for a seat at the table. I was already home. And what I've learned through all of this, it isn't only about betrayal or family or even truth. It's about the space you fight for when no one believes you deserve it. The silence you choose instead of the lies they offer. The life you build from scraps until it becomes something unshakable. Mine. It's about more than just telling a story. It's about reclaiming your voice in a world that sometimes seems designed to drown it out. There are moments in life when silence feels safer, when keeping your head down promises less conflict, fewer storms. But silence left too long can begin to suffocate. And so, reclaiming your voice isn't always about shouting the loudest or winning battles in public. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with flashing cameras, breaking headlines, or a courtroom verdict. Sometimes justice is quieter. It's found in the stillness of a morning where your breath comes easier than it did the day before. It's in hearing your own name spoken not with shame, not with scorn, but with dignity. It's in a message from a young person who says, "Thank you. Because of you, I feel like I belong. Because of you, I'm not afraid to try." That's what this story is really about. So, let me turn the question to you. Have you ever stood at that crossroads between keeping the peace for others or finally speaking up for your own peace of mind? Have you ever felt that tightness in your chest when you stayed quiet too long, or the trembling relief that comes when you finally let the truth leave your lips? If you have, I'd love to hear from you. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of a time when you stood your ground, or maybe of a moment when you wish you had, drop a 1 in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Share your piece of the story because your voice matters here, every single one of them. And if this story didn't connect with you, that's okay too. I'd still love to know why. Sometimes what doesn't resonate tells us just as much as what does. Every voice carries weight, even when it disagrees. And hey, if you'd like to hear more stories like this, real stories, not polished fairy tales, but the kind that come from the heart, the kind that linger with you long after the screen goes dark, then go ahead and subscribe. Because if this video found you, if you're hearing these words right now, maybe it's because you were meant to. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next.